I don't need your charity. The words came out sharper than Adrian intended, but the woman standing in front of him, Victoria Sterling, billionaire, untouchable, didn't even flinch. Good, she said coldly, because I'm not offering any. What Adrian didn't know was that this moment, this collision of two broken people in a marble hallway, would either save them both or destroy everything they'd tried so hard to protect. This is their story. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it moves you, hit that like button. Now, let's begin. The alarm went off at 4:47 a.m., 3 minutes before Adrian had actually set it, because the clock on his nightstand had been broken for 2 months, and he couldn't afford to replace it. He slapped the snooze button anyway, a reflex born from years of exhaustion, then immediately felt the guilt creep in. 3 more minutes meant 3 fewer minutes with Emma before school. He dragged himself out of bed, his lower back protesting with that familiar ache that came from standing on restaurant floors for 12-hour shifts. The apartment was cold. Denver winters didn't care that your heating bill was overdue. Adrian grabbed the hoodie draped over his chair, the same one he'd worn yesterday and the day before that, and padded quietly down the narrow hallway toward the kitchen. The place was small, cramped, really. 1 bedroom for Emma and a pull-out couch in the living room for him. The paint was peeling near the windows, and the refrigerator made a grinding noise that kept him awake some nights. But the rent was $890 a month, and that was all that mattered. He could afford $890. Barely. Adrian flipped on the kitchen light and winced at the brightness. The coffee maker sputtered to life, a hand-me-down from his aunt who'd died 3 years ago. It only worked half the time, but today was a good day. The smell of cheap grocery store grounds filled the tiny space, and Adrian let himself have one long breath before the day really started. His phone buzzed on the counter. Shift reminder, Lou's Diner, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Shift reminder, Sterling Heights Tower. Cleaning crew, 4 p.m. to 10 p.m., 16 hours. He could do 16 hours. He'd done it before. Adrian poured the coffee into a chipped mug that said, World's Best Dad, in faded letters. Emma had picked it out for him 2 Father's Days ago, spending her own allowance money at a thrift store. He'd cried in the bathroom after she gave it to him, and he still didn't know if she'd noticed. Daddy? He turned. Emma stood in the doorway, her hair a mess of tangles, clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 3. She was 7 now, but she still looked impossibly small in her oversized pajamas. Hey, baby girl. Adrian crouched down, setting the mug aside. You're up early. I heard the beep thing. The alarm? She nodded, rubbing her eyes. Are you leaving soon? Not for a little bit. Come here. Emma shuffled over and climbed into his lap, resting her head against his chest. Adrian wrapped his arms around her and held on tighter than he probably should have. She smelled like the lavender shampoo he bought in bulk from the dollar store, and her heartbeat was steady and small against his ribs. You want pancakes? He asked. We have pancakes. We have the mix, the one you like. The one with the blueberries on the box? That's the one. Emma tilted her head up to look at him, and Adrian saw his own eyes staring back at him. Dark brown, a little too serious for a kid her age. But you said we have to save that for special. Today's special. Why? Because I need to see you smile before I go stand on my feet for 16 hours. Because your mom hasn't called in 3 years. And I'm terrified you'll forget what it feels like to be someone's whole world. Because I said so, Adrian said instead, poking her gently in the ribs. That's why. She giggled, and the sound cracked something open in his chest. By 5:43 a.m., Adrian was locking the apartment door behind him, his backpack slung over one shoulder. Inside, a change of clothes for the cleaning shift, a water bottle he'd refilled from the tap, and a Tupperware container with leftover rice and chicken he'd eat cold during his break. Emma was still asleep. Mrs. Chen from 3B would check on her before school and walk her to the bus stop. Adrian paid her $40 a week under the table, money he didn't really have, but Mrs. Chen never asked questions, and Emma liked her. It was enough. The bus ride to Lou's Diner took 30 minutes and cost $2.75 each way. Adrian kept his head down, earbuds in but no music playing. He'd learned a long time ago that people left you alone if they thought you were busy. The city slid past the window in shades of gray and orange streetlights, and Adrian watched it all without really seeing any of it. His mind was already at the diner. Lou's was the kind of place that smelled like grease and burnt coffee and something unidentifiable that had probably been cooked into the floors decades ago. The vinyl booths were cracked, the menus were sticky, and the regulars were either truck drivers passing through or people who had nowhere else to go at 6 in the morning. Adrian had worked there for 4 years. "Late again, Cole," Lou barked the second Adrian pushed through the door. "I'm 3 minutes early. Early is on time. On time is late." Adrian bit back a response and tied his apron around his waist. Lou was 60-something, built like a fire hydrant, and had the personality of a cactus, but he paid in cash every Friday and didn't ask about social security numbers. Adrian couldn't afford to piss him off. "Table 4 needs a refill," Lou said, jerking his thumb toward the dining area. "And the grease trap's backing up again. Deal with it before the lunch rush." "Got it." The morning blurred together the way it always did. Orders shouted across the kitchen, plates stacked up his arm, the constant noise of the griddle and the dishwasher, and Lou yelling about something that didn't matter. Adrian moved through it on autopilot. Coffee for the guy in the corner booth, scrambled eggs and toast for the woman who came in every Tuesday and Thursday, hash browns extra crispy for the trucker who tipped in quarters. His feet hurt. His back hurt. He smiled anyway. "Anything else I can get you?" Adrian asked, setting down a plate of pancakes in front of a middle-aged man in a suit. The man barely looked up from his phone. "No." "Great. Let me know if you need anything." No response. Adrian walked away and felt the familiar tightness in his jaw. 4 years of this. 4 years of people treating him like furniture, like he wasn't even there. He wasn't bitter about it, or at least he told himself he wasn't. But some days it sat heavier than others. By 2 p.m., his shift was over. Adrian clocked out, grabbed his backpack from the storage closet, and caught the bus heading east towards Sterling Heights. Maggi. Sterling Heights Tower was everything Lou's Diner wasn't. Sleek, modern, expensive in a way that made Adrian's teeth ache. The building stretched 37 floors into the Denver skyline, all glass and steel and the kind of architecture that showed up in magazines. It housed tech companies, law firms, venture capital offices, the kind of people who made more money in a day than Adrian had seen in his entire life. And twice a week, Adrian cleaned their floors. The cleaning company, Rocky Mountain Services, paid $18 an hour under the table. It wasn't great, but it was better than nothing, and the shifts didn't overlap with the diner. Adrian had been doing it for 8 months now, and he still felt out of place every time he walked through the service entrance. "Cole, you're on 32 tonight." Adrian nodded at his supervisor, a woman named Denise who chain-smoked during breaks and didn't make small talk. "Got it. Vacuum, dust, trash, executive suite, so don't touch anything on the desks." "Never do." "Yeah, well, last guy touched something. He doesn't work here anymore." Adrian took the freight elevator up, the metal walls rattling slightly as it climbed. The 32nd floor was quiet when he stepped out. Most of the offices were empty by now, just the occasional light still on where someone was working late. He started in the hallway. Vacuum first, then the trash bins, then dusting. Adrian had the routine down to a science. He moved quickly, efficiently, trying not to think about how the marble floors probably cost more than his entire apartment, trying not to think about the framed art on the walls, the kind of stuff Emma would probably love if she ever got to see it. He was halfway down the hall when it happened. The cleaning cart caught on something, maybe a loose tile, maybe his own exhaustion, and tipped. Everything spilled. Bottles of cleaning solution, trash bags, the vacuum hose. It all clattered across the pristine marble floor in a cacophony that echoed down the empty hallway like a gunshot. "Shit!" Adrian hissed, dropping to his knees. His hands moved fast, grabbing bottles, shoving trash bags back into the cart. His heart was pounding. Denise would kill him. She told him 100 times to be careful, to not make noise, to not... "Are you all right?" Adrian froze. The voice came from behind him, low, controlled, and unmistakably female. He turned slowly, still on his knees, and looked up. The woman standing in the hallway was probably in her early 30s, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Adrian's car. Her dark hair was pulled back in a way that looked effortless, but definitely wasn't, and her expression was completely unreadable. She wasn't smiling, she wasn't frowning, she was just watching him. "I'm fine," Adrian said quickly, scrambling to his feet. I'm sorry, I'll clean this up right now. It won't. You're bleeding. Adrian blinked. What? The woman gestured toward his hand. Your palm. He looked down. She was right. A bottle must have broken when it fell, and there was a thin line of red running across his palm where the glass had caught him. It's nothing, Adrian said. I'll take care of it. You should bandage that before you keep working. I don't have... He stopped himself. I'll be fine. The woman tilted her head slightly, and for the first time something flickered across her face. Not concern, exactly, more like curiosity. What's your name? She asked. Adrian hesitated. Adrian Cole. Adrian. She repeated it like she was testing how it sounded. Do you always work this late? Tuesdays and Thursdays. And during the day? The question caught him off guard. I work at a diner. So you work 2 jobs. It wasn't a question, but Adrian nodded anyway. Yeah. That's a lot of hours. It pays the bills. The woman studied him for a moment longer, and Adrian felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest. He didn't know who she was, but everything about her screamed power. The kind of person who could get him fired with a single phone call. I'll clean this up, he said again, his voice a little too sharp. I'm sorry for the noise. Don't apologize. Excuse me? You're hurt, and you're trying to clean up broken glass with your bare hands. Apologizing seems counterproductive. Adrian didn't know what to say to that. The woman reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. She held it out toward him, and Adrian took it automatically. Victoria Sterling CEO, Sterling Innovations Floor. 37. Adrian's stomach dropped. Victoria Sterling. Everyone in Denver knew that name. She'd built a tech empire from nothing, turned Sterling Innovations into a billion-dollar company before she was 30. Forbes called her the Ice Queen. Business Insider said she was the most ruthless CEO in the state, and Adrian had just spilled cleaning supplies all over her building. I'll have someone bring you a first aid kit, Victoria said, her tone still completely neutral. Finish up here and go home. You shouldn't be working with an open wound. I can't. You can. She turned to leave, then paused. Adrian. Yeah? How much do you make an hour doing this? The question felt like a trap, but Adrian answered anyway. 18. Victoria nodded once, as if confirming something she'd already suspected. Then she walked away, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. Adrian stood there for a long time after she was gone, holding the business card in his bleeding hand. He didn't tell anyone about the encounter. Not Denise, not Lou, not even Mrs. Chen when she asked how his day went. Adrian just went home, microwaved leftover spaghetti for Emma, helped her with her homework, and tucked her into bed with the same bedtime story he'd told her 100 times before. But when he finally collapsed onto the pull-out couch at midnight, he pulled the business card out of his pocket and stared at it. Victoria Sterling. What the hell did she want with him? Open. The answer came 3 days later. Adrian was in the middle of the lunch rush at Lou's, balancing 4 plates on his arms and trying not to drop anything, when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Cole! Order up! Coming. Adrian delivered the plates, refilled 2 coffees, and ducked into the storage closet to check his phone. 3 missed calls from a number he didn't recognize. 1 voicemail. He pressed play. Mr. Cole? This is Elena Vasquez calling on behalf of Victoria Sterling. Ms. Sterling would like to meet with you to discuss a potential employment opportunity. Please return this call at your earliest convenience. Adrian's heart stopped. An employment opportunity. With Victoria Sterling. He played the voicemail again, just to make sure he'd heard it right. Then he stepped out of the closet, walked straight to the break room, and called the number back. The meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon at Sterling Heights Tower. Adrian borrowed a button-down shirt from a guy at the diner, ironed it twice, and showed up 15 minutes early because he didn't know what else to do. The lobby was just as intimidating as he remembered, all glass and polished stone and people in expensive suits who looked like they belonged there. Adrian did not belong there. Mr. Cole? He turned. A woman in her 40s, sharply dressed, with the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'm Elena Vasquez, Ms. Sterling's assistant. Follow me, please. They took the elevator to the 37th floor. The doors opened onto a space that looked more like a penthouse than an office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city, and the furniture was the kind of minimalist modern that probably cost a fortune. Everything was white and black and chrome. And standing in the center of it all, backlit by the afternoon sun, was Victoria Sterling. She looked exactly the same as she had in the hallway, controlled, unreadable, impossibly put together. "Mr. Cole," she said, "thank you for coming." "Ms. Sterling?" Adrian's voice came out steadier than he felt. "I have to admit, I'm a little confused about why I'm here." "Sit." It wasn't a request. Adrian sat. Victoria took the chair across from him, crossing her legs and folding her hands in her lap. For a moment, she didn't say anything. She just looked at him, the same way she had in the hallway, like she was trying to figure out a puzzle. "I need someone to manage my household," she said finally. Adrian blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "A house manager. Someone to oversee the day-to-day operations of my estate, coordinate with staff, handle scheduling, manage vendors. It's a live-in position. Salary is $120,000 annually, plus room and board." Adrian's brain short-circuited. "You want me to work for you?" "Yes." "Why?" Victoria's expression didn't change. "Because I've been watching you." The words hung in the air like a blade. "Watching me," Adrian repeated slowly. "For the past 2 months, you've worked the cleaning shifts on this floor. You're punctual. You're thorough. You don't cut corners and you don't complain. You're also raising a daughter on your own while working 2 jobs, which tells me you're capable of managing complicated logistics under pressure." Adrian's mouth went dry. "How do you know about my daughter?" "I know a lot of things, Mr. Cole. It's my job to know things." "That's—" He stopped at himself, trying to keep his voice level. "That's invasive." "It's practical." Victoria leaned forward slightly. "I'm offering you a job that will pay you more in 1 year than you've made in the past 5 combined. You'll have housing, benefits, and enough stability to actually give your daughter the life she deserves. The only question is whether you're willing to accept it." Adrian's hands clenched into fists on his knees. "And what's the catch?" "There's no catch." "There's always a catch." For the first time, something almost like amusement flickered across Victoria's face. "You're right to be suspicious. But in this case, the answer is simple. I need someone competent, and you need money. It's a transaction." "A transaction?" "Yes." Adrian stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I don't need your charity." "Good," Victoria said, her voice cold and sharp, "because I'm not offering any." They stared at each other. Adrian's pulse was hammering in his ears. Every instinct he had was screaming at him to walk out, to not let this woman, this stranger, buy him like some kind of employee off a shelf. But then he thought about Emma, about the overdue heating bill, about the pull-out couch, and the broken alarm clock, and the 16-hour days that were killing him slowly. "Why me?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "You could hire anyone. Why me?" Victoria stood as well, and when she spoke, her tone was almost honest. "Because you're not anyone, Mr. Cole. You're someone who showed up to work with a bleeding hand and didn't complain. You're someone who makes pancakes for his daughter even when there's barely enough money for rent. And I need someone like that in my home." Adrian swallowed hard. "I need to think about it," he said. "You have 24 hours. Victoria walked to her desk and pulled out a folder. "Everything you need to know is in here: salary, benefits, expectations. Read it, decide. And if the answer is yes, I'll see you Monday morning." She held out the folder. Adrian took it. That night, Adrian sat at his tiny kitchen table with the folder open in front of him and Emma asleep in the next room. The numbers didn't feel real. $120,000 a year, health insurance, a place to live. He read the contract 3 times, looking for the loopholes, the fine print, the part where it all fell apart. But it was straightforward, almost too straightforward. Victoria Sterling wanted a house manager, and she wanted him. Adrian leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. He thought about Lou's diner and the grease trap and the customers who didn't say thank you. He thought about the cleaning shifts and the marble floors and the freight elevator that rattled. He thought about Emma and the way she'd asked if today was special just because he'd made her pancakes. And he thought about Victoria Sterling, standing in that massive office, telling him he wasn't anyone. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe he'd spent so long being no one that he'd forgotten what it felt like to be someone. Adrian pulled out his phone and dialed the number on the business card. It rang twice. "Mr. Cole," Victoria's voice came through, calm and unsurprised. "I take it you've made a decision." "Yeah," Adrian said, "I have." "And?" He closed his eyes. "I'll take the job." There was a pause, then, "Good. I'll send a car for you Monday morning. Pack light. Everything else will be provided." "Ms. Sterling, Victoria." "Victoria," he corrected. "I need you to understand something." "I'm listening." "I'm doing this for my daughter. Not for you, not for the money. For her. I wouldn't expect anything less." The line went dead. Adrian sat there in the dark, holding his phone, and wondered if he'd just made the best decision of his life or the worst. Monday morning came too fast. Adrian packed 2 duffel bags, one for him, one for Emma. Clothes, a few books, the stuffed rabbit she refused to sleep without. Mrs. Chen cried when he told her they were leaving, and Lou just grunted and said he'd mail the last paycheck. The car that pulled up outside the apartment at 8 a.m. was a black SUV with tinted windows and a driver in a suit. Emma's eyes went wide. "Daddy, are we going to a movie?" "Something like that, baby." They climbed into the back seat, and Adrian watched his apartment building disappear through the rear window. 4 years. 4 years of fighting just to survive, and now he was driving away in a car that probably cost more than everything he owned. The estate was 40 minutes outside the city, hidden behind gates and tall trees that blocked it from the road. When they finally pulled through, Emma gasped. "It's a castle," she whispered. It wasn't, but it was close. The house, mansion, really, was all stone and glass, sprawling across perfectly manicured lawns with fountains and gardens that looked like something out of a magazine. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. The car stopped in front of the main entrance, and the driver opened the door. "Ms. Sterling is waiting inside," he said. Adrian took Emma's hand and walked up the steps. The front door opened before he could knock. Victoria stood there dressed in all black, her expression as unreadable as ever. But when her eyes landed on Emma, something shifted, just for a second. "You must be Emma," Victoria said, her voice softer than Adrian had ever heard it. Emma nodded shyly, half hiding behind Adrian's leg. "I have a son about your age," Victoria continued. "His name is Lucas. I think you'll like him." "I like rabbits," Emma said suddenly, holding up her stuffed animal. Victoria's lips twitched. "Then you'll definitely like the gardens. We have wild rabbits." Emma's face lit up, and Adrian felt something crack open in his chest all over again. Victoria stepped aside. "Come in." They walked into the foyer, and Adrian tried not to stare at the marble floors, the crystal chandelier, the sweeping staircase that looked like it belonged in a movie. This was insane. This was his life now. "I'll show you to your quarters," Victoria said, already walking. "Dinner is at 6. Lucas is in school, but he'll be home by 3. We'll do introductions then." "Okay," Adrian managed. They followed her through hallways that seemed to go on forever, past rooms Adrian didn't even have names for. Finally, Victoria stopped in front of a door and pushed it open. "This is yours." Adrian stepped inside and froze. The suite was bigger than his entire apartment. There was a king-size bed, a sitting area, a bathroom with a tub the size of a small pool, and connected to it, through another door, was a smaller room clearly meant for Emma, painted soft yellow, with a bed shaped like a cloud and shelves already stocked with books. Emma ran past him and jumped onto the bed, laughing. "Daddy, look! It's so bouncy!" Adrian couldn't move. Victoria stood in the doorway watching him. "This is too much," he said quietly. "It's what you agreed to." "I agreed to a job, not this." "This is the job, Mr. Cole." Victoria's voice was firm now. "You work for me. You live here. You manage my household and keep things running smoothly. In return, you and your daughter have a home. It's not charity. It's employment." Adrian turned to look at her, and for the first time he saw something behind the ice. Loneliness. "Okay," he said. Victoria nodded once. "Unpack. Settle in. I'll see you at dinner." She left without another word. Adrian stood there, listening to Emma laugh in the other room. and wondered what the hell he'd just gotten himself into. The first week felt like living inside someone else's dream. Adrian woke up every morning in a bed that didn't creak, in a room where the heating actually worked, and for the first few days he kept expecting someone to tell him there'd been a mistake, that he didn't belong here, that they'd figured out he was just some guy from a one-bedroom apartment who didn't know the difference between a salad fork and a dinner fork, but no one said anything. Victoria's instructions had been clear. Manage the household staff, coordinate schedules, handle vendor relationships, and make sure everything ran smoothly. It sounded simple on paper. In reality, it meant learning the names of 12 different employees, figuring out which cleaning service handled which rooms, memorizing Victoria's schedule down to the minute, and trying not to feel like an imposter every time he walked past a piece of furniture that probably cost more than a year of his old salary. Emma adjusted faster than he did. By day 3, she'd already made friends with Maria, the housekeeper who snuck her cookies after lunch. By day 5, she'd explored every inch of the gardens and named 4 of the wild rabbits. By day 7, she'd stopped asking when they were going home, because this was home now. Adrian was still trying to wrap his head around that. It was Tuesday afternoon when he finally met Lucas. Adrian had been in the kitchen going over the weekly grocery order with Thomas, the private chef Victoria kept on staff, when he heard footsteps echoing down the hallway. Quick, light, the sound of a kid who didn't want to be noticed. A moment later, a boy appeared in the doorway. He was small for 8, with dark hair that fell into his eyes and the same sharp features as his mother. He wore a school uniform, navy blazer, pressed shirt, tie slightly loosened, and he stopped dead when he saw Adrian standing there. "Who are you?" Lucas asked. Not rude, just cautious. "Adrian Cole. I work for your mom." Adrian set down the clipboard he'd been holding. "You must be Lucas." The boy's eyes narrowed slightly. "Where's Raymond?" "Who's Raymond?" "The last house manager. He quit 2 months ago." "Well," Adrian said carefully, "I'm the new one." Lucas studied him for a long moment, and Adrian could practically see the gears turning in the kid's head, evaluating, measuring, deciding whether Adrian was worth his time. It was unnerving how much he looked like Victoria when he did that. "Do you have kids?" Lucas asked finally. "A daughter, Emma. She's 7. "Is she here?" "Yeah, probably in the gardens right now. She's obsessed with the rabbits." Something flickered across Lucas's face. Not quite interest, but not complete indifference either. "I'm going to my room," he said abruptly, and then he was gone before Adrian could respond. Thomas glanced up from the cutting board where he'd been chopping vegetables. "He's a good kid, just quiet." "Yeah," Adrian said. "I got that. His father left 3 years ago. Hasn't seen him since." Adrian felt something twist in his chest. "That's rough." "Miss Sterling works a lot," Thomas continued, his tone carefully neutral. "Lucas spends most of his time with the tutors or by himself. It's not ideal, but—" He trailed off with a shrug that said everything he wasn't saying out loud. Adrian thought about Emma, about the way she'd clung to him every night for months after Caroline left, about the nightmares and the questions he didn't know how to answer. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I get it." That evening, Adrian found Lucas sitting alone in the library, a massive room lined floor to ceiling with books that probably cost more than Adrian's entire childhood education. The kid was curled up in an oversized leather chair, reading something that looked too advanced for his age. Adrian knocked on the doorframe. "Hey!" Lucas looked up. "What?" "Dinner's in 20 minutes. Your mom asked me to let you know." "She's eating with us?" The surprise in Lucas's voice was like a punch to the gut. "That's what she said." Lucas closed his book slowly. "She usually eats in her office." "Well, not tonight." The kid didn't respond, just stared at Adrian like he was trying to figure out if this was some kind of trick. Adrian hesitated in the doorway. "Emma's nervous about meeting you, by the way." "Why?" "Because she's 7 and you're 8, and apparently that makes you basically a grown-up in her mind." Lucas's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "She's not annoying, is she?" he asked. "Sometimes, but in a good way." "What's a good way?" Adrian thought about it. "She asks a lot of questions, and she talks to her stuffed rabbit like it's real. And she makes me read the same bedtime story every single night even though I've probably read it 500 times at this point. That sounds annoying. Yeah, Adrian admitted, but I'd miss it if she stopped. Lucas processed that in silence. Then he stood up, tucking his book under his arm. I guess I'll come to dinner. Good, because I have no idea what half the food Thomas makes actually is, and I'm hoping you can tell me so I don't look like an idiot. That got an actual smile. Small, but real. Dinner was awkward in the way that all first dinners are. The dining room was absurdly formal. A table that could seat 20, crystal chandeliers, china that looked like it belonged in a museum. Emma sat between Adrian and Lucas, swinging her legs because her feet didn't touch the floor, while Victoria sat at the head of the table in a black blouse that probably cost more than Adrian's car. She looked tired. Not visibly. Her makeup was perfect, her posture immaculate. But Adrian had spent enough years reading people across diner counters to recognize exhaustion when he saw it. How was school? Victoria asked Lucas, her tone polite but distant. Fine. Did you finish your science project? Yes. And the piano practice? An hour, like you said. Victoria nodded, cutting into her food with precise movements. Good. The silence that followed was suffocating. Emma, bless her heart, didn't seem to notice. We saw 6 rabbits today, she announced, looking at Lucas. One of them was brown and really fat. I named him Marshmallow. Lucas blinked. Why Marshmallow? Because he looks squishy. Rabbits aren't squishy. This one is. You should come see. I've seen the rabbits. But have you seen Marshmallow? Lucas opened his mouth, then closed it. No. Then you haven't seen all the rabbits. Emma took a triumphant bite of her chicken, completely oblivious to the fact that she'd just won an argument with someone a year older than her. Adrian caught Victoria watching the exchange, and for just a second he saw something soft cross her face. Then it was gone. Emma, Adrian said gently, let Lucas eat. I'm just telling him about Marshmallow. I know, but maybe use your inside voice. Emma's inside voice was only marginally quieter than her outside voice, but Adrian let it slide. After dinner, Lucas retreated to his room without a word, and Emma demanded a second tour of the gardens, even though it was already getting dark. Adrian was about to take her when Victoria appeared in the hallway. I'll take her, she said. Adrian blinked. You sure? Yes. Emma looked up at Victoria with wide eyes, clearly unsure what to make of this tall, intimidating woman who'd barely spoken to her. Do you want to see the rabbits? Victoria asked, her voice careful. Emma nodded slowly. Then let's go. Adrian watched them walk out the back door together, Victoria in her expensive clothes and heels, Emma in her light-up sneakers, and felt something strange settle in his chest. When they came back 20 minutes later, Emma was chattering nonstop about Marshmallow, and Victoria was listening with an expression Adrian couldn't quite read. That night, after Emma was asleep, Adrian found Victoria in her study. He knocked, and she looked up from her laptop. Thank you, Adrian said, for taking her to see the rabbits. She's enthusiastic. That's a polite way of saying she talks a lot. Victoria's lips twitched. She's 7. It's allowed. Adrian stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. Can I ask you something? That depends on the question. Why do you eat dinner alone most nights? Victoria's expression didn't change, but something shuddered behind her eyes. Because it's easier. Easier than what? Than sitting across from my son and having nothing to say to him. The honesty of it hit Adrian like a slap. He pulled out the chair across from her desk and sat down without asking permission. Lucas is a good kid. I know. He's also lonely as hell. Victoria's jaw tightened. I'm aware. Are you? Mr. Cole? Adrian? Adrian, she corrected, her voice sharp now. I don't need parenting advice from someone I hired 2 weeks ago. I'm not giving you advice. I'm telling you what I see. And what do you see? Adrian leaned forward. I see a kid who's surprised when his mom shows up to dinner. I see a woman who works 16-hour days because she doesn't know what else to do. And I see 2 people who care about each other but have no idea how to say it. Victoria stared at him, and for a long moment, Adrian thought she might fire him on the spot. Instead, she set down her pen. His father left because I chose my company over our marriage, she said quietly. He told me I was married to my work, Not to him. And he was right. That doesn't mean I don't know how to be a mother, Adrian. I know how to run a company. I know how to close deals and manage boards and build products. But I don't know how to talk to an 8-year-old about his day without it feeling like a performance review. Adrian's throat tightened. So learn. It's not that simple. Yeah, it is. He stood up. Show up. That's it. That's the whole thing. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be there. Victoria looked up at him, and Adrian saw something crack in her carefully constructed armor. He doesn't need perfect, Adrian said softly. He just needs you. He left before she could respond. The next morning, Victoria joined them for breakfast. Lucas nearly dropped his orange juice. I have a meeting at 9, Victoria said, pouring herself coffee. But I thought I'd eat with you first. Lucas stared at her like she'd just announced she was joining the circus. Emma, oblivious, launched into a story about a dream she'd had involving marshmallow and a top hat. And Victoria, improbably, smiled. It became a routine after that, after breakfast every morning. Dinner most evenings, unless Victoria had a late meeting she couldn't move. It was stilted at first, awkward conversations that never quite found their rhythm, but slowly, incrementally, things started to shift. Lucas began talking about school without prompting. Victoria started asking questions that weren't just boxes to check. And Emma, in her 7-year-old wisdom, filled every silence with stories about rabbits and clouds and whatever else crossed her mind. Adrian watched it all from the sidelines, managing schedules and vendor orders and staff rotations, and tried not to think about how comfortable he was starting to feel. 3 weeks in, everything fell apart. Adrian was in the kitchen inventory room counting supplies and updating spreadsheets when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Hello? Adrian? The voice on the other end made his blood run cold. Caroline. How did you get this number? Adrian's voice came out flat, controlled. Is that any way to greet your wife? Ex-wife. Semantics. Caroline's laugh was sharp, familiar in the worst way. I heard you landed yourself a nice setup. Big house. Rich boss. Good for you. Adrian's hand tightened on the phone. What do you want? I want to see my daughter. No. I have rights, Adrian. You gave up your rights when you walked out 3 years ago. I made mistakes. Her voice turned sickeningly sweet. But I've changed. I'm clean now. I have a job. I want to be part of Emma's life again. Bullshit. Excuse me? You don't want Emma. You want money. You found out I'm working for Victoria Sterling, and you think you can cash in. The silence on the other end told him everything. I could make this difficult, Caroline said finally, the sweetness gone. I could call a lawyer, file for custody, drag you through court until you can't afford to fight anymore. Or what? Or you could make this easy. Give me $50,000 and I'll disappear. Sign away my rights. You'll never hear from me again. Adrian's vision blurred. You're extorting me. I'm offering you a solution. Get the hell out of my life, Caroline. He hung up. His hands were shaking. Adrian sank onto one of the storage room stools and put his head in his hands. $50,000. It might as well have been $50 million. He had maybe $3,000 in savings, and that had taken him 2 years to build. Adrian? He looked up. Victoria stood in the doorway, her expression sharp and assessing. What's wrong? She asked. Nothing. Don't lie to me. Adrian laughed, but it came out bitter. My ex-wife just called. She wants money to stay away from Emma. Victoria went very still. How much? $50,000, which I don't have. I'll write you a check. No. Adrian, I said no. He stood up, his voice harder than he intended. I'm not taking your money. Why not? Because I'm not a charity case. This isn't charity. It's... What? A loan? An advance on my salary? Come on, Victoria. We both know I'd never be able to pay you back. Victoria stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. Then don't. That's not how this works. Then tell me how it works, because from where I'm standing, your daughter is being threatened and you're too proud to accept help. Adrian's jaw clenched. You don't understand. Try me. I spent 4 years scraping by, working myself into the ground, doing everything I could to give Emma a decent life. And I managed. Barely, but I managed. And then you show up with your money and your estate and your job offer, and suddenly everything's supposed to be fine. But it's not fine. Because the second I take your money, the second I let you fix this, I'm admitting that I couldn't do it myself. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Adrian's head snapped up. Excuse me? You heard me. Victoria's eyes were blazing now. You're so obsessed with doing everything alone that you're willing to put your daughter at risk just to protect your ego. It's not about ego. Then what is it about? It's about being worth something. The words ripped out of him before he could stop them. It's about not being the guy who failed, who couldn't keep his wife, who couldn't provide for his kid, who needed someone to swoop in and save him because he wasn't enough on his own. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria stared at him, and Adrian saw something shift in her expression. You think I don't know what that feels like? She said quietly. What? You think I don't know what it's like to feel like you're failing? To look at your child and wonder if you're ruining them just by being who you are? She took a step closer. I built $1 billion company, Adrian. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, and I can't figure out how to have a conversation with my 8-year-old son without feeling like I'm doing it wrong. Adrian's anger deflated. We're all failing at something, Victoria said. The only difference is whether we're willing to accept help when it's offered. Adrian looked at her, really looked at her, and saw past the expensive clothes and the perfect makeup to the woman underneath. Tired, scared, human. I'll pay you back, he said finally. I don't want you to. Victoria. But if it makes you feel better, we can call it a loan. 0 interest. Pay it back whenever you can. Or don't. I genuinely don't care. Adrian's throat felt tight. Why are you doing this? Because Emma deserves better than a mother who shows up asking for ransom. And because you're too stubborn to protect her if it means swallowing your pride. That's not... It is. Victoria pulled out her phone. Give me your ex-wife's number. Why? Because I'm going to handle this. You don't have to... Adrian. She looked at him, and her voice was steel. I didn't build a company by letting people extort me. Give me the number. He did. Victoria made 3 phone calls. The first was to her lawyer. The second was to a private investigator. The third was to Caroline directly, and Adrian only heard Victoria's side of the conversation, but it was enough. Ms. Hayes, this is Victoria Sterling. I'm calling regarding your contact with Adrian Cole. Yes, that Victoria Sterling. I'm going to be very clear about what happens next. You will not contact Adrian again. You will not contact Emma. You will sign a legal document relinquishing all parental rights, and in exchange, you will receive a one-time payment of $25,000. No, that's not negotiable. Because the alternative is that I make it my personal mission to ensure you never work in this state again. And trust me when I say I have the resources to do exactly that. I'm glad we understand each other. My lawyer will be in touch tomorrow. Goodbye. Apostis. She hung up and looked at Adrian. It's done. Adrian couldn't speak. She'll sign the papers, Victoria continued. My investigator will verify she's actually clean, and if she's not, the deal is off, and we pursue full legal termination of her rights. Either way, she's out of your life. I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything. But Adrian stepped forward and did something he'd never done before. He hugged her. Victoria went rigid, clearly not expecting it, but after a moment her arms came up and she hugged him back. Thank you, Adrian whispered. You're welcome. When they pulled apart, something had shifted between them, something neither of them was ready to name. That Friday night, Adrian made dinner. Not Thomas, not the catering service Victoria sometimes used for events, just Adrian in the massive chef's kitchen, making the only thing he knew how to make really well, homemade pizza. You're kidding, Lucas said when Adrian announced the plan. Nope, we're making pizza from scratch, dough and everything. Why? Because it's fun. Lucas looked deeply skeptical. Emma, on the other hand, was already bouncing on her toes. Can I do the cheese? You can do whatever you want. Victoria appeared in the doorway, still dressed in her work clothes. What's happening? Pizza night, Adrian said, tossing her an apron. You're helping. I have emails to... They can wait. Victoria opened her mouth to argue, then caught the look on Lucas's face. The kid was watching her, waiting to see what she'd choose. She put on the apron. It was chaos. Emma got flour everywhere. Lucas was surprisingly meticulous about spreading sauce. Victoria had no idea what she was doing and kept asking questions like she was in a board meeting. And Adrian stood in the middle of it all, laughing harder than he had in years. "No, you have to stretch it," he told Victoria, demonstrating with his hands. "Like this." "It's tearing." "Because you're being too gentle. It's dough, not glass." "I don't cook," Victoria said, glaring at the blob of dough in her hands. Clearly, she threw a pinch of flour at him. Adrian froze. Emma gasped. Lucas's eyes went wide. Then Victoria smiled, actually smiled, and Adrian threw flour back. Within seconds, it was a war. By the time the pizzas went into the oven, they were all covered in flour and sauce and cheese, and the kitchen looked like a disaster zone. And it was perfect. They ate in the kitchen instead of the dining room, sitting on stools around the island, and the pizza was lopsided and slightly burnt, but somehow the best thing Adrian had tasted in months. "This is weird," Lucas said. "Good weird or bad weird?" Adrian asked. Lucas thought about it. "Good weird." Emma fell asleep on the couch after dinner, curled up with her rabbit. Adrian carried her to bed and tucked her in, brushing the hair out of her face. When he came back downstairs, he found Victoria in the living room, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the gardens. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For tonight. For making my son laugh. For making me feel like—" She trailed off. "Like what?" "Like I'm not completely failing at this." Adrian walked over and stood beside her. "You're not failing. I spent 3 years convinced I was doing the right thing, providing for him, building something he could be proud of. But I was just avoiding him because I didn't know how to be what he needed. You're figuring it out now. Because of you." Adrian looked at her. "I didn't do anything. You did everything." Victoria turned to face him, and there was something raw in her expression. "You walked into my house and made it feel like a home. You made my son smile. You made me want to be here instead of hiding in my office." Adrian's heart was pounding. "Victoria, I know we can't." She took a step back. "You work for me. It would be inappropriate. It would complicate everything." "Yeah," Adrian said. "It would." They stood there in the dark, 2 feet apart and miles away. "I should go to bed," Victoria said finally. "Yeah." She walked past him, and Adrian caught the faint scent of her perfume, something expensive and subtle that he'd probably never be able to afford. At the doorway, she paused. "Adrian?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad you took the job." "Me too." She left, and Adrian stood alone in the dark, wondering how the hell he was supposed to keep working for a woman he was falling in love with. The paperwork arrived 6 days later. Adrian was in the library reviewing the monthly household budget when Elena appeared in the doorway, holding a manila envelope. "This just came from Ms. Sterling's attorney," she said, handing it over. Adrian opened it with hands that weren't quite steady. Inside were documents terminating Caroline's parental rights. Signed, notarized, final. At the bottom was a cashier's check made out to Caroline Hayes for $25,000, marked as cashed 3 days prior. It was over. Adrian stared at the papers until the words blurred together, and he had to remind himself to breathe. "Mr. Cole?" Elena's voice was gentler than usual. "Are you all right?" "Yeah," Adrian managed. "Yeah, I'm good." She nodded and left him alone. Adrian sat there for a long time, holding the proof that Emma was finally, legally, completely his. No more threats, no more leverage. Caroline was gone for good this time, bought off and sent away by a woman who barely knew him 2 months ago. He needed to thank Victoria. He found her in her office that evening, buried in spreadsheets and conference call notes. She looked up when he knocked, and something flickered across her face before she schooled it back to neutral. "The papers came," Adrian said from the doorway. "I know. I don't know how to thank you." Victoria set down her pen. "You don't need to thank me." "Victoria, you would have done the same for Lucas if the situation were reversed." "Would he?" Adrian wanted to say yes immediately, but the truth was more complicated. A month ago, he wouldn't have had the resources. Hell, a month ago he'd been cleaning floors and serving burnt coffee to truckers who didn't tip. Maybe, Adrian said. But I didn't have to. You did. Then we're even. We're not even close to even. Victoria stood and walked around her desk, leaning against the front edge. She was wearing dark slacks and a cream blouse, and her hair was starting to fall out of the twist she'd pinned it in that morning. She looked tired and real and nothing like the ice queen the magazines wrote about. I need to tell you something, Victoria said quietly. Adrian's stomach tightened. Okay, I'm attracted to you. The words hung in the air like broken glass. Adrian's mouth went dry. Victoria, let me finish, and she held up a hand. I'm attracted to you, and that's a problem. You work for me. There's a power dynamic here that makes anything between us inappropriate at best and exploitative at worst. I know that. I'm aware of it. And I need you to know that I would never act on it. Adrian couldn't look away from her. What if I feel the same way? Then we're both in trouble. Yeah, Adrian said. We are. Victoria's jaw tightened. This can't happen. I know. I could fire you, make this easier. You won't. How do you know? Because you need me, Adrian said. And I don't mean as an employee. I mean Lucas needs me. Emma needs stability. And as much as you hate admitting it, you need someone around who doesn't treat you like a walking checkbook. Victoria's eyes flashed. You're awfully confident. Am I wrong? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Adrian took a step into the office. So what do? We ignore it. We stay professional. We focus on the kids. Can you do that? I've done harder things. That's not an answer. Victoria looked at him for a long moment, and Adrian saw the crack in her armor widen just slightly. I don't know, she admitted, but I'm going to try. Adrian nodded. Okay. He turned to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth, I think you're terrifying and impossible, and the most fascinating person I've ever met. Victoria's breath caught. Adrian, I'll see you at breakfast. He left before she could respond, and spent the rest of the night lying awake in his too comfortable bed, trying not to think about the woman sleeping 3 doors down. 2 weeks passed in careful choreography. They were professional, polite. They discussed schedules and grocery orders and Lucas's upcoming science fair project with the practiced ease of people who'd agreed not to acknowledge the elephant in the room. But the tension was there, in the way Victoria's hand would brush his when she passed him papers, in the way Adrian's eyes would linger half a second too long when she walked into a room, in the silence that felt heavier than any conversation. Lucas noticed something was different, though he couldn't put his finger on what. Emma, blissfully oblivious, continued her campaign to befriend every rabbit on the property and convince Lucas that Marshmallow was, in fact, the superior rabbit. It was almost working. Adrian caught them in the gardens one afternoon, crouched near the hedge where the rabbits liked to hide. Lucas was explaining something about rabbit behavior in the serious tone he used when he was trying to sound older than 8, and Emma was listening with the kind of rapt attention she usually reserved for bedtime stories. They're territorial, Lucas said, so Marshmallow probably has a burrow somewhere around here. Can we find it? Maybe, but we shouldn't get too close. We might scare them. Marshmallow isn't scared of anything. He's a rabbit, Emma. Everything scares rabbits. Adrian smiled and turned to head back inside, only to find Victoria standing a few feet away, watching the same scene with an expression he couldn't quite read. They're good together, she said quietly. Yeah, they are. Lucas has never had a friend before, not a real one. Adrian looked at her. What about at school? He's polite to the other children, but he doesn't connect with them. His therapist thinks it's because he's afraid they'll leave. Victoria's voice was carefully controlled, but Adrian heard the pain underneath, like his father did. That's not your fault. Isn't it? I chose work over my marriage. I chose board meetings over bedtime stories. I gave Marcus every reason to leave. He left because he's a coward, Adrian said flatly. Not because you work too much. Victoria's head snapped toward him. You don't know what happened. I know he abandoned his kid. That's all I need to know. It's more complicated than that. No, it's not. Adrian's voice was harder now. I've been broke. I've been exhausted. I've had days where I didn't know how I was going to pay rent or put food on the table. And I never once thought about walking away from Emma, because that's not what parents do. Victoria's eyes were bright. Marcus said I was cold, that I couldn't connect emotionally, that living with me was like living with a stranger. He was wrong. Was he? Adrian turned to face her fully. You're not cold, Victoria. You're scared. There's a difference. I don't know how to be what Lucas needs. Yes, you do. You show up to breakfast. You ask about his day. You put on an apron and make terrible pizza with flour in your hair. That's what he needs. That's not enough. It's everything. Victoria looked back at the garden where Lucas and Emma were still searching for rabbit burrows, and something in her expression cracked open. I don't want to fail him, she whispered. You won't. You can't promise that. No, Adrian admitted, but I can promise you won't fail him alone. Victoria's breath hitched, and when she looked at him, there were tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. Before Adrian could think better of it, he reached out and took her hand. She didn't pull away. They stood there in the afternoon sun, hands clasped, watching their children laugh in the garden, and neither of them acknowledged what it meant. The call came 3 days later. Adrian was helping Emma with her homework when his phone rang. Unknown number again. His stomach dropped. Hello? Is this Adrian Cole? A woman's voice, professional, unfamiliar. Who's asking? My name is Jessica Morrison. I'm an attorney representing Caroline Hayes. Adrian's blood went cold. She signed the papers. We had a deal. I'm aware. I'm calling because Ms. Hayes was involved in a car accident yesterday evening. She's in critical condition at Denver General. Adrian sank into the nearest chair. Is she going to be okay? We don't know yet, but she's asking for you and for Emma. Absolutely not. Mr. Cole, she gave up her rights. She took the money and signed the papers. She doesn't get to ask for anything now. She's dying. The words hit like a physical blow. What? Internal bleeding, multiple organ failure. The doctors are doing everything they can, but Jessica's voice softened. She might not make it through the night, and she's asking to see her daughter one last time. Adrian closed his eyes. No. Mr. Cole, I understand this is difficult. You don't understand anything. His voice shook. She walked out on Emma 3 years ago. She didn't call, didn't write, didn't send a single birthday card. And then she showed up demanding money, and now she's dying and suddenly she wants to play mom? I'm not asking you to forgive her. I'm asking you to let a dying woman say goodbye to her daughter. Emma doesn't even remember her. Then maybe this is Emma's chance to have closure. Adrian wanted to throw the phone across the room. Instead, he took a slow breath. I need to think about it. She might not have much time. I said I'll think about it. He hung up and sat there staring at nothing. Emma appeared in the doorway. Daddy, who was that? Nobody, baby, just work stuff. Oh, can you help me with number 7? I don't get it. Adrian forced a smile. Yeah, let me see. He helped her finish her homework, made dinner, read her a story, and tucked her in. And then he went to find Victoria. She was in the study, as always, laptop open and phone beside her. We need to talk, Adrian said from the doorway. Victoria looked up immediately, reading his expression. What happened? He told her everything. When he finished, Victoria was quiet for a long moment. What do you want to do? She asked finally. I want to say no. I want to protect Emma from her. But she's dying, and I keep thinking about Emma 20 years from now, wondering if she should have said goodbye, wondering if I made the wrong choice. Victoria stood and walked over to him. This isn't your choice to make alone. She's 7. She can't. I'm not talking about Emma. I'm talking about you. Victoria's voice was gentle. You're carrying this by yourself, and you don't have to. Adrian's throat felt tight. I don't know what to do. Then let's figure it out together. They talked for 2 hours. Victoria played devil's advocate, forcing Adrian to consider every angle. What Emma would remember. What she might regret. What closure actually meant for a 7-year-old who barely remembered the woman who'd given birth to her. In the end, Adrian made a decision. They would go to the hospital, but Emma wouldn't go into the room alone. Adrian would be there, and if Caroline said one thing that hurt Emma, they were leaving. Victoria arranged everything. She called the hospital and spoke to the head administrator, ensuring Adrian and Emma would have privacy. She had her driver take them in one of the less conspicuous cars. She even offered to come along, but Adrian shook his head. "This is something I need to do," he said. "I know, but the offer stands." The hospital smelled like disinfectant and fear. Adrian held Emma's hand as they walked through the sterile hallways, following signs to the ICU. Emma was quiet, picking up on his tension, even if she didn't understand it. "Daddy, are you okay?" she asked in the elevator. "Yeah, baby, I'm okay." "Where are we going?" Adrian crouched down to her level. "Do you remember your mom?" Emma's face scrunched up. "A little. She had yellow hair. Blonde hair. Yeah." Adrian took a breath. "She's very sick right now, and she asked if she could see you." "Why?" "I don't know, baby, but I thought maybe you'd want to say hello." Emma processed this with the seriousness of someone much older. "Is she nice now?" The question broke Adrian's heart. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I'll be right there with you the whole time. And if you want to leave, we leave, okay?" "Okay." They found room 417. Jessica Morrison was waiting outside, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a tired smile. "Mr. Cole, thank you for coming." Adrian nodded stiffly. "She's awake, but she's weak. The doctor said to keep it brief." "We will." Jessica looked down at Emma. "You must be Emma." Emma nodded shyly. "Your mom is very happy you're here." Adrian's jaw clenched, but he didn't contradict her. They went inside. Caroline looked nothing like the woman Adrian remembered. She'd always been thin, but now she was skeletal, her skin gray, and her hair matted against the pillow. Tubes ran from her arms and nose, and the machines beside her bed beeped steadily. Her eyes opened when they entered, and something flickered across her face when she saw Emma. "Baby," she whispered. Emma pressed closer to Adrian's leg. "Hi, Caroline," Adrian said evenly. "Adrian?" Her voice was barely audible. "Thank you for bringing her." "I'm not doing this for you." Caroline's mouth twitched. "I know." Adrian pulled a chair over and lifted Emma onto his lap. "You wanted to see her. Here she is." Caroline's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Emma. "You're so big now." Emma didn't respond. "I'm sorry," Caroline said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, baby. I shouldn't have left. I was sick and scared, and I thought you'd be better off without me. But I was wrong. I was so wrong." Adrian felt Emma's small body tense against his chest. "I know you don't remember me," Caroline continued, "and I know you probably hate me. But I need you to know that I loved you. I still love you, even when I was gone." "Then why did you leave?" The question came from Adrian, not Emma, but it was the one that mattered. Caroline looked at him, and for the first time he saw something genuine in her eyes. "Because I was using," she said quietly. "Pills first, then anything I could get my hands on. And I knew if I stayed, I'd drag you both down with me." "You could have gotten help." "I tried. 3 rehabs, Adrian, 3. And I relapsed every time." Tears streamed down her face. "I thought leaving was the kindest thing I could do." "It wasn't." "I know." Emma shifted in Adrian's lap. "Are you going to die?" Caroline's breath hitched. "Probably, sweetheart." "Does it hurt?" "A little." Emma was quiet for a moment, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small drawing, something she must have made in the car. It was a rabbit, probably marshmallow. "You can have this," Emma said, holding it out. "So you're not scared." Caroline took the drawing with shaking hands, and the sob that came out of her was raw and broken. "Thank you, baby." Emma looked up at Adrian. "Can we go now?" "Yeah," Adrian said, his own eyes burning. "We can go." He stood, setting Emma on her feet. "Adrian?" Caroline called weakly. He turned back. "Take care of her. Better than I did." "I already am." It wasn't kind, but it was honest. They left the hospital and drove home in silence. Emma fell asleep in the car, her head resting against Adrian's shoulder. When they pulled up to the estate, Victoria was waiting on the front steps. "How did it go?" she asked quietly. "She's dying, probably tonight." Adrian carried Emma inside. She apologized. Emma gave her a drawing. "How are you?" "I don't know yet." Victoria followed him upstairs. Adrian tucked Emma into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin and kissing her forehead. When he came back out, Victoria was waiting in the hallway. "She's not a bad person," Adrian said, "just a broken one." "That doesn't excuse what she did." "No, but it explains it." Victoria reached out and took his hand. "You're a good father, Adrian." "I'm trying." "You're succeeding." Adrian looked down at their joined hands. "We said we wouldn't do this." "I know. We agreed to stay professional." "I know." "Then why are you holding my hand?" Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. "Because right now, I don't care about professional." Adrian pulled her closer, and Victoria came willingly, resting her head against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her and held on, and neither of them said anything. They stood like that for a long time, in the dark hallway of a mansion that had started to feel like home. Caroline died at 3:47 a.m. Jessica called to let Adrian know. He thanked her and hung up, then lay in bed staring at the ceiling until dawn. Emma took the news quietly when he told her at breakfast. "Is she with the angels now?" she asked. Adrian didn't believe in angels, but he nodded anyway. "Yeah, baby, she is." "Okay, that was it." Emma went back to her cereal, and Adrian realized she'd already said her goodbye. The funeral was small. Jessica handled the arrangements, and Adrian took Emma because it felt like the right thing to do. Victoria offered to come, and this time Adrian said yes. There were maybe 8 people there, a few of Caroline's cousins, someone from the last rehab she'd attended, Jessica and her assistant, and Adrian, Emma, and Victoria. The service was short, generic, the kind of thing you got when nobody really knew the deceased well enough to write something personal. Afterward, one of Caroline's cousins approached Adrian. "I just wanted to say thank you," the woman said, "for bringing Emma. It meant a lot to Caroline." "Yeah," Adrian said, "I know. She talked about you, you know. In rehab. Said you were the only good thing she'd ever done." Adrian's chest tightened. "She said that?" "All the time. She knew she'd screwed up. She just didn't know how to fix it." The woman walked away, and Adrian stood there feeling like he'd been punched. Victoria's hand slipped into his. "You okay?" she asked. "I don't know." "That's allowed." On the drive home, Emma fell asleep again, and Victoria moved to the seat beside Adrian. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Yeah." "Do you regret it, going to see her?" Adrian thought about Caroline's gray face and the drawing Emma had given her. He thought about the apology and the tears and the machines that couldn't save her. "No," he said, "I don't." "Good." They drove in silence for a while. Then Victoria said, "I filed for full custody of Lucas." Adrian's head snapped toward her. "What?" "Marcus's lawyer reached out last month, said Marcus wanted visitation rights." Victoria's voice was tight. "After 3 years, he just decided he wanted to be a father again." "What did you say?" "I told him to go to hell. Then I filed for full custody and termination of his parental rights." "Can you do that?" "I can do anything, Adrian. That's the benefit of having an army of lawyers." She looked out the window. "But I'm terrified." "Why?" "Because what if I'm wrong? What if Lucas needs his father, and I'm taking that away from him?" Adrian reached over and took her hand. "Lucas needs someone who shows up, and that's you." "You don't know that." "Yeah, I do, because I've been watching you. You're not the same person you were 2 months ago. Because of you. Because you decided to try. That's all on you." Victoria's fingers tightened around his. "What are we doing, Adrian?" "I don't know. We can't keep pretending this isn't happening." "I know. I'm your employer. There's a power dynamic. It's inappropriate." "Yeah. But I don't want to stop." Adrian looked at her, at this brilliant, terrifying, impossible woman who'd turned his life upside down. "Neither do I," he admitted. Victoria leaned across the seat and kissed him. It was soft and tentative, and everything Adrian hadn't let himself imagine. When they pulled apart, Victoria's eyes were wide. "We shouldn't have done that," she whispered. "Probably not. This complicates everything." "I know." "Adrian, I'm falling in love with you," he said. "And I know that's complicated and messy and probably a terrible idea, but it's the truth." Victoria stared at him, and for once she had no response. The driver cleared his throat from the front seat. "We're here, Ms. Sterling." They'd arrived at the estate. Victoria pulled away, composing herself instantly. We'll talk about this later. Will we? Yes. Adrian carried Emma inside, and Victoria disappeared into her study. They didn't talk about it that night, or the next, but 3 days later, after the kids were in bed and the house was quiet, Victoria appeared in Adrian's doorway. We need to set ground rules, she said. Okay. The kids come first, always. Agreed. And we keep this private. No one can know. Not the staff, not the kids, not until we figure out what this is. Fine. Victoria stepped into the room and closed the door behind her. And if this falls apart, she said quietly, you don't leave. The kids need stability, and they need you here. I'm not going anywhere. Promise me. Adrian stood and walked over to her. I promise. Victoria looked up at him, and all the armor she wore during the day was gone. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Neither do I. But you're willing to try? Yeah, Adrian said. I am. She kissed him again, and this time it wasn't tentative. This time it was real. They kept it secret for 3 weeks. Stolen moments after the kids went to bed. Quiet conversations in the study with the door locked. Kisses in darkened hallways where no one would see. It felt like being teenagers again, sneaking around, except they were both in their 30s and the stakes were infinitely higher. Adrian hated lying to Emma. Not that he was lying exactly, more like carefully omitting certain details. Like the fact that when he said he was going over schedules with Ms. Sterling, he was actually sitting on her couch with her head on his shoulder. Or that late-night budget reviews sometimes involved considerably less budgeting and considerably more talking about things that had nothing to do with household expenses. Victoria was different when they were alone, softer. She laughed more easily, made terrible jokes, and once admitted she'd watched the entire first season of a reality cooking show because Adrian mentioned he used to love cooking. It's trash television, she'd said defensively. I know, that's why it's great. They don't even cook things correctly. The techniques are all wrong. You don't watch it for the techniques. Then what do you watch it for? Adrian had grinned. The drama. Victoria had thrown a pillow at him, and they'd ended up kissing on the couch until Adrian's watch alarm reminded him it was past midnight and he needed to at least pretend to sleep in his own room. But the secrecy was getting harder. Lucas was too observant for his own good, and Adrian caught him watching them more than once with an expression that suggested he was trying to solve a puzzle. Emma, thankfully, remained oblivious, more interested in her ongoing campaign to build Marshmallow, a proper rabbit house in the gardens. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. Adrian was in the kitchen with Thomas, going over the menu for an upcoming dinner party Victoria was hosting for her board members, when his phone rang. The number was vaguely familiar, but he couldn't place it. Hello? Adrian Cole? Yeah, who's this? This is Dr. Patricia Mendez. I'm calling from Denver Community College. You submitted an application to our culinary arts program about 4 months ago? Adrian's heart stopped. He'd forgotten about that application. It had been one of those desperate midnight decisions, back when he was still working double shifts and dreaming about a life that felt impossibly far away. He'd filled out the forms, attached his transcripts from the program he'd dropped out of 8 years ago, and hit submit without really believing anything would come of it. I remember, Adrian said carefully. Well, I'm pleased to inform you that you've been accepted for the fall semester. Classes start in September. Adrian sat down hard on the nearest stool. I'm sorry, what? Dr. Mendez laughed. You've been accepted. Congratulations. Adrian's brain was short-circuiting. Are you sure? Quite sure. Your previous coursework transferred over beautifully, and your essay was very compelling. We'd love to have you in the program. Adrian pressed his free hand against his forehead. Can I have some time to think about it? Of course. The enrollment deadline is July 15th, so you have about 6 weeks. I'll send you all the information via email. Thank you. I mean it. Thank you. We look forward to hearing from you, Mr. Cole. Adrian hung up and stared at his phone. Thomas glanced over from where he was chopping vegetables. Everything okay? Yeah, Adrian said faintly. I just got accepted to culinary school. Thomas set down his knife. That's fantastic. Congratulations. Thanks. You don't sound excited. I don't know if I can go. Why not? Because I have a job here, Because Emma is finally settled, because I'm in love with my boss and I don't know how to tell her I might be leaving 3 days a week for classes. It's complicated, Adrian said instead. Thomas gave him a knowing look. Most things worth doing are. Adrian found Victoria in her office an hour later. She was on a video call, but she held up one finger and muted her microphone. 5 minutes, she mouthed. Adrian nodded and waited in the hallway, pacing back and forth while his thoughts spiraled. What was he supposed to say? He'd been accepted to school, the thing he'd wanted for years, and now it felt like a bomb about to go off in the middle of the fragile life they'd built. Classes were 3 evenings a week plus Saturday mornings. He'd be gone more, distracted, less available for the kids, less available for her. The door opened and Victoria appeared, closing it behind her. Sorry, board member who doesn't understand the word brevity. What's wrong? I got into culinary school. Victoria blinked. What? Adrian explained about the application, the phone call, the acceptance letter that was probably sitting in his email right now. When he finished, Victoria was quiet for a long moment. That's wonderful, she said finally. Is it? Of course it is. Why wouldn't it be? Because I work for you, and school is 3 nights a week plus Saturdays. I don't know how that fits with... He gestured vaguely between them. Everything. Victoria's expression shifted into something harder to read. Are you asking my permission? What? No. Because you don't need it. This is your life, Adrian. Your career. I know that, but it affects you. It affects Lucas and Emma. We'll figure it out. Just like that? Victoria stepped closer. Do you want to go to culinary school? Adrian stopped. Yeah, I do. Then you should go. What about my job? We'll adjust your responsibilities. You can manage the household during the day and attend classes at night. Or we hire an assistant manager to cover when you're not here. Victoria's voice was matter-of-fact, like she was solving a business problem instead of rearranging their entire lives. This isn't complicated, Adrian. It feels complicated. Only because you're making it complicated. She reached up and touched his face. I'm not going to hold you back from something you want. That's not who I am. Adrian caught her hand and held it. What if I fail? Then you fail, and you try again. What if it's too much? School and Emma and this job and... He stopped, not quite able to say us. Victoria finished the sentence for him. And us? Yeah, then we'll deal with it when it happens. But don't make decisions based on fear of what might go wrong. Make them based on what you actually want. Adrian pulled her close and kissed her, and Victoria melted against him in a way that still surprised him every time. When did you get so wise? He murmured. I've always been wise. You just weren't paying attention. He laughed against her hair. I'm enrolling. Good. Thank you. For what? For not making me choose. Victoria pulled back to look at him. I would never make you choose, Adrian. That's not love, that's control. The word hung in the air between them, love. Neither of them had said it out loud yet, not since that night in the car, but there it was. Victoria, don't. She pressed her fingers to his lips. Not yet. Let's just take this one step at a time. Adrian nodded, even though the words were sitting in his throat like stones. He enrolled the next day. Emma was thrilled when he told her, immediately launching into plans for what kind of restaurant they should open when he graduated. Lucas was more reserved, but offered a quiet, that's cool, that felt like high praise coming from an 8-year-old. The problem started a week later. Adrian was reviewing the catering contract for Victoria's board dinner when Elena appeared in the doorway of his office looking uncomfortable. Mr. Cole, there's someone here to see you. I'm not expecting anyone. I know. He says his name is Marcus Hayes and he's Lucas's father. Adrian's blood went cold. Where is he? Front entrance. I didn't let him pass the gate. Good. Keep him there. I'll handle it. Adrian found Victoria in a conference call and knocked sharply on her study door. She looked up, annoyed, then saw his face and immediately muted the call. What happened? Marcus is at the front gate. Victoria stood so fast her chair rolled backward. What? Elena stopped him. He's asking to see Lucas. Absolutely not. That's what I thought. But we should probably... Victoria was already moving, grabbing her phone and dialing. Andrew? I need you at the house immediately. Yes, now. Marcus showed up. Andrew was Victoria's head of security, a former cop who looked like he could break someone in half without trying. He arrived within 10 minutes, and the three of them walked down to the gate together. Marcus was leaning against a rental car, smoking a cigarette. He was maybe 40, well-dressed in that casual, expensive way that screamed wealth without effort. Handsome in a way that had probably opened doors for him his entire life. Adrian hated him on sight. Victoria, Marcus said, dropping his cigarette and crushing it under his shoe. You look good. What are you doing here? Victoria's voice was ice. I came to see my son. You gave up that right. I made a mistake. I'm trying to fix it. 3 years too late. Marcus's eyes flicked to Adrian. Who's this? The new nanny? I'm the house manager, Adrian said evenly, and you need to leave. I'm talking to my wife. Ex-wife, Victoria corrected. And Adrian is right. You need to leave before I have security remove you. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're really going to keep me from my own kid? I'm going to protect my son from a father who abandoned him. I didn't abandon him. We agreed I'd step back while we worked on the divorce. You stopped calling. You stopped visiting. You sent exactly 2 birthday cards in 3 years, Marcus. That's not stepping back. That's walking away. I was giving you space. You were avoiding responsibility. Victoria's voice cracked just slightly. Lucas cried himself to sleep for months. He asked me every single day when you were coming home, and I had to tell him I didn't know because you wouldn't even return my lawyer's calls. Marcus's jaw tightened. I made mistakes. I'm trying to make it right. By showing up unannounced, by demanding access to a child you haven't seen in years? He's my son. Then where were you? The question came out raw. Where were you when he had nightmares? When he stopped talking for 6 weeks because he thought he'd done something wrong? Where were you when his therapist said he had abandonment issues because his father decided being a parent was too hard? Marcus flinched. Victoria. No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to show up and pretend the last 3 years didn't happen. I have rights. You have paperwork, Adrian cut in. And according to that paperwork, you're currently fighting termination of parental rights. So until that's settled, you don't have anything. Marcus's eyes narrowed. And who the hell are you to talk about my son? I'm the person who's been here, the person who helped Victoria put him back together after you broke him. You've known him for what, a few months? I'm his father. Biologically, sure. But being a father is more than genetics. It's showing up. It's being there when things are hard. And you failed at that. Marcus took a step forward, and Andrew moved immediately to block him. I'd think very carefully about your next move, Mr. Hayes, Andrew said calmly. Marcus looked at Victoria. I'm not giving up. I want to see Lucas. Then you'll see him in court, Victoria said. With lawyers and a judge and a child psychologist who will testify that you showing up like this is harmful to his emotional development. Now get off my property before I call the police. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then got in his car without another word. They watched him drive away. Victoria's hands were shaking. You okay? Adrian asked quietly. No. Andrew cleared his throat. I'll make sure he doesn't come back, and I'll brief the rest of the security team. Thank you, Andrew. When they were alone, Victoria turned to Adrian. He's going to fight this, she said. I know. And he has money. Not as much as me, but enough to make this ugly. Let him try. Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. What if the court sides with him? What if they say Lucas needs his father? Then we'll deal with it. But you heard your lawyer. You have documentation, therapist reports, 3 years of evidence that he wasn't there. That might not be enough. Adrian pulled her close. Then we'll make sure it is. That night, Victoria told Lucas what had happened. Adrian sat beside her on the couch in Lucas's room while the boy listened with that too serious expression that made him look older than 8. Your father came to the house today, Victoria said carefully. He wants to see you. Lucas's face went blank. Why? I don't know, sweetheart. But I told him no. Good. The word was so matter-of-fact that Victoria actually flinched. Lucas, I don't want to see him, Mom. He left. He doesn't get to just come back. I know, and I'm going to make sure he can't force you to. Lucas looked at Adrian. Is he going to take me away? No, Adrian said firmly. That's not going to happen. How do you know? Because your mom won't let it happen, and neither will I. Lucas studied him for a long moment. You promise? Adrian knew he couldn't actually promise that. The courts could rule however they wanted. But looking at this kid who'd already been abandoned once, Adrian couldn't bring himself to hedge. I promise. Lucas nodded, and some of the tension left his shoulders. That night, after Lucas was asleep, Victoria and Adrian sat in her study going over legal documents her lawyer had sent. Marcus's attorney filed for emergency visitation, Victoria said, scanning the pages. They're claiming I'm alienating Lucas from his father. That's insane. That's family court. Victoria rubbed her eyes. The hearing is in 2 weeks. What do we need to do? Prepare. My lawyer wants to interview Lucas, get a statement from his therapist, compile evidence of Marcus's absence. What about character witnesses? Victoria looked up. What? People who can testify about how you are with Lucas, how much you've changed in the past few months. Who would I ask? Adrian gestured around the study. Thomas, Maria, Elena, people who see you with him every day. They work for me. Their testimony would be biased. Everyone's testimony is biased. That's how testimony works. Adrian leaned forward. But they can talk about the dinners, the pizza nights, the way you show up now. A judge needs to see that you're not the same person you were when Marcus left. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I'm scared, she admitted. I know. What if I lose him? You won't. You can't know that. Adrian reached across the desk and took her hand. Then we'll fight like hell to make sure it doesn't happen. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. Victoria's lawyer, a sharp woman named Rebecca, who looked like she could argue circles around anyone, interviewed everyone in the household. She spent an hour with Lucas, carefully asking questions designed to gauge his feelings about his father without traumatizing him further. Adrian gave his statement too, talking about what he'd observed over the past few months. The way Victoria had gone from distant and removed to present and engaged, the family dinners, the laughter, the way Lucas had started smiling again. Rebecca listened carefully, taking notes. You're close with the family, she observed. I work for them. It seems like more than that. Adrian kept his expression neutral. I care about Lucas, and I want what's best for him. And what's best for him is staying with his mother? Without question. The hearing fell on a Thursday. Victoria wore a navy suit that made her look like she was heading into a board meeting, armor firmly in place. Adrian wanted to go with her, but Rebecca advised against it. The fewer people in the courtroom, the better, she said. This needs to feel intimate, not like a production. So Adrian stayed home with Emma and Lucas, trying to keep them distracted while his stomach twisted itself into knots. Emma wanted to play in the garden. Lucas wanted to sit in the library and read. Adrian split the difference, setting up a blanket outside where Lucas could read while Emma hunted for marshmallow. Is Mom going to be okay? Lucas asked after a while. Yeah, buddy, she's going to be fine. What if the judge says I have to go with my dad? Adrian set down the book he'd been pretending to read. Do you want to go with your dad? No? Then you tell the judge that if they ask. Your mom's lawyer said you might have to talk to the judge. And if you do, you just tell the truth about how you feel. Lucas chewed his lip. What if he gets mad? Your dad? Yeah. Then he gets mad. But you don't have to protect his feelings, Lucas. You're 8. You get to say how you feel. Lucas nodded slowly, processing. Emma appeared from the bushes holding a dandelion. I couldn't find marshmallow, but I found this. It's for Mom. For good luck. Adrian's throat tightened. She's going to love it, baby. Victoria came home at 4:30. Adrian heard the car in the driveway and met her at the door. She looked exhausted, her makeup slightly smudged, her hair falling out of its twist. How did it go? Adrian asked. I don't know yet. The judge took it under advisement. We'll have a ruling in a week. A week? Could be worse. Could be a month. Victoria's voice was flat, drained of emotion. Where's Lucas? Library. She headed that direction, and Adrian followed. Lucas looked up when they entered, and his whole body tensed. Hey, sweetheart, Victoria said, sitting beside him on the couch. I'm okay. Everything's okay. Did you see Dad? I did. What did he say? Victoria chose her words carefully. He said he misses you, that he wants to be part of your life again. Lucas's hands clenched on his book. What did you say? I said that was up to you, and that no one was going to make you do anything you don't want to do. Good. Victoria pulled him close, and Lucas let himself be held in a way he usually resisted. I love you, Victoria whispered. No matter what happens, I love you. Okay? I love you too, Mom. Adrian left them alone and went to find Emma. That night, after the kids were in bed, Victoria fell apart. Adrian found her in her bathroom, sitting on the floor with her knees pulled to her chest, crying so hard she was shaking. He didn't say anything, just sat down beside her and pulled her against his chest. I can't lose him, Victoria sobbed. I can't. You won't. You don't know that. I know you're a good mother. I know Lucas loves you, and I know that judge saw that today. What if it's not enough? Adrian pressed his lips to her hair. Then we'll figure out the next step. But you're not doing this alone, Victoria. I'm right here. She cried for a long time, and Adrian just held her. Eventually, her breathing evened out. I'm sorry, she whispered. For what? For falling apart. You're allowed to fall apart. That's what I'm here for. Victoria pulled back to look at him, her eyes red and swollen. I don't know what I'd do without you. Good thing you don't have to find out. She kissed him, desperate and clinging, and Adrian kissed her back. They ended up in her bed, and for the first time since they'd started whatever this was, it felt like more than stolen moments. It felt like a promise. The ruling came 6 days later. Rebecca called Victoria at 9 in the morning, and Adrian watched her face go carefully blank as she listened. I understand, Victoria said. Thank you, Rebecca. She hung up. Adrian's heart was pounding. What did she say? The judge denied Marcus's petition for visitation, said there was insufficient evidence of a meaningful relationship between father and child, and that forcing contact would be harmful to Lucas's emotional well-being. Adrian let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. That's good. That's really good. Marcus can appeal, but Rebecca thinks it's unlikely to succeed. Victoria sank into her chair. It's over, for now, at least. Then we'll take the win. Victoria looked up at him, and for the first time in days, she smiled. That afternoon, they told Lucas together. His reaction was subdued, a small nod, a quiet, okay. But Adrian saw the relief in the way his shoulders relaxed. Does this mean he's not coming back? Lucas asked. It means he can't force you to see him, Victoria said. But if you ever change your mind, if you ever want to talk to him, that's your choice, okay? Lucas thought about it. I don't think I will. That's okay too. That night they had pizza again. Emma insisted on making it a celebration, complete with streamers she'd made from construction paper and a card she'd drawn for Victoria that said, Best Mom, in crayon. Lucas added his own drawing, a stick figure family of 4 standing in front of a house. Victoria cried when she saw it. Is that us? She asked. Lucas nodded. You, me, Emma, and Adrian. Victoria looked at Adrian, and he saw the question in her eyes. Is this real? Is this what we are now? Adrian just smiled. Later, when the kids were asleep and the house was quiet, Victoria and Adrian sat on her bedroom balcony, overlooking the gardens. I have to tell you something, Victoria said. Okay. I'm in love with you. The words were simple, but they hit like an earthquake. Adrian turned to look at her. Yeah? Yeah, Victoria's voice was steady now. And I know it's complicated. I know we're still figuring out what this is, but I needed you to know. I'm in love with you too, Adrian said. Have been for a while. How long? Remember that first pizza night when you had flour in your hair and you were laughing at something Emma said? That was months ago. I know. Victoria reached for his hand. What do we do now? We keep going, one day at a time. And when people find out, then they find out. Adrian squeezed her hand. I'm not hiding this forever, Victoria. Eventually, we're going to have to tell the kids, and the staff, and whoever else needs to know. I know. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I'm just scared. Of what? Of screwing this up, of losing you. You're not going to lose me. Promise? Adrian turned and kissed her, soft and slow. I promise. The secret lasted another month. Adrian started culinary school in September, and the rhythm of their lives shifted again. 3 nights a week, he'd leave after dinner to sit in a classroom that smelled like caramelized sugar and roasting meat, learning techniques he'd forgotten and discovering new ones he'd never known existed. Saturday mornings were spent in the teaching kitchen, practicing knife skills and plate presentation while his instructor, a former Michelin-starred chef named Philippe, who'd retired to teach, critiqued every movement. It was exhausting. It was incredible. Victoria rearranged her schedule to be home on the nights Adrian had class, taking over bedtime routines with a determination that would have been funny if it wasn't so earnest. She read Emma the same rabbit story Adrian had been reading for months, stumbling over the voices but trying anyway. She helped Lucas with homework, sitting beside him at the kitchen table and working through math problems with the same focus she brought to quarterly earnings reports. The kids adjusted. Emma started calling Victoria Miss V instead of Ms. Sterling, which somehow felt significant. Lucas began leaving his bedroom door open more often, a silent invitation that Victoria took every time. And Adrian fell more in love with her every single day. The breaking point came on a Friday in late October. Adrian had just gotten home from class, tired and smelling like garlic and brown butter, when he found Lucas sitting alone in the dark kitchen. "Hey, buddy, what are you doing up?" Lucas shrugged. "Couldn't sleep." Adrian flipped on the light and immediately noticed Lucas's red-rimmed eyes. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." "Lucas." The boy's jaw trembled. Kids at school were talking about their dads, about this thing on Sunday where fathers and sons do activities together. And I said I wasn't going because I don't have a dad. And Tyler Morrison said that's stupid because everyone has a dad. And I told him mine left. And then he said, Lucas's voice cracked, "He said my dad must not have loved me very much if he left." Adrian's heart shattered. He sat down beside Lucas and pulled him close. "That kid doesn't know what he's talking about." "But what if he's right? He's not. Your dad leaving had nothing to do with you. That was about him, about his own problems. Then why does it feel like it was my fault?" Adrian thought about Caroline, about the years he'd spent wondering what he could have done differently, about the guilt that still crept in sometimes, whispering that he should have been enough to make her stay. "Because that's what abandonment does," Adrian said quietly. "It makes you think you weren't worth staying for. But that's a lie, Lucas. You are worth it. You've always been worth it." Lucas wiped his eyes. "I wish you were my dad." The words hit Adrian like a physical blow. "Lucas, I know you're not. I know you're just the house manager. But you're here. And you help with homework and you make terrible jokes and you don't leave." Lucas looked up at him. "That's what dads are supposed to do, right?" Adrian's throat was too tight to speak. Before he could figure out what to say, Victoria appeared in the doorway. She'd clearly been on her way to bed, hair down, wearing pajamas Adrian had never seen her in, no makeup. She looked young and vulnerable and completely frozen as she took in the scene. "Lucas, baby, what's wrong?" she asked. Lucas turned to her. "Can Adrian be my dad?" Victoria's eyes went wide. "I mean, not like officially," Lucas continued quickly, "but like, can he come to the father-son thing at school? Because I don't want to be the only kid without someone." Adrian watched Victoria process this, saw the emotions flicker across her face too quickly to name. "That's not really how it works, sweetheart," she said carefully. "Why not?" "Because Adrian works for us. He's not family." The words were meant to be explanatory, but they landed like stones. Lucas's face crumpled. "Right. Okay." He stood up and headed for the stairs, and Victoria called after him. "Lucas, wait." But he was already gone. Victoria sank into the chair Lucas had vacated and put her head in her hands. "I handled that badly," she said. "Yeah. I panicked." "I know." Victoria looked up at him. "What was I supposed to say? That you're more than an employee? That we're—" She gestured helplessly between them. "Whatever this is." "Maybe." To our 8-year-old son, Adrian's heart caught on the word our, but he pushed it aside. He already knows something's different. Kids aren't stupid. But if we tell him, then we tell him, and we deal with whatever comes next. Victoria stood abruptly. "I need to think." She left, and Adrian sat alone in the kitchen, wondering if he'd just watched everything fall apart. The next morning, Victoria was gone before breakfast. Elena said she'd left for an emergency board meeting, but Adrian suspected it was more about avoidance than actual emergency. He made pancakes for Emma and Lucas, though Lucas barely touched his. "Is Mom mad at me?" Lucas asked quietly. "No, buddy. She's not mad." "Then why did she leave?" "Because sometimes adults need space to figure things out." Lucas pushed his pancakes around his plate. "I shouldn't have asked about the dad thing." "Hey." Adrian waited until Lucas looked at him. "You didn't do anything wrong. You asked for what you needed. That's brave." It didn't feel brave. The best kinds of brave usually don't. Emma, oblivious to the tension, launched into a story about a dream she'd had involving Marshmallow learning to fly, and Adrian let the conversation shift. But his mind was racing. Victoria came home late that afternoon carrying a leather folder and wearing an expression Adrian couldn't read. "Can we talk?" she asked. "All of us. You, me, and Lucas." Adrian's stomach dropped. "Okay." They gathered in the living room, Lucas on the couch looking nervous, Adrian in the chair across from him, Victoria standing by the window like she was preparing to deliver bad news. "Lucas?" Victoria started, then stopped. She took a breath and tried again. "I owe you an apology. What I said last night was wrong." Lucas blinked. "What?" "I said Adrian wasn't family, but that's not true." Victoria's voice was shaking slightly. "He is family. Maybe not in the traditional sense, but in every way that matters." Adrian's heart was pounding. Victoria crossed to the couch and sat beside Lucas. "I've been scared to tell you this because I didn't want to confuse you or make things more complicated, but Adrian and I, we care about each other, a lot. And I think we have for a while now." Lucas looked between them. "Like, you're dating?" "Something like that." "Oh." Lucas processed this. "Is that why you've been smiling more?" Victoria laughed, surprised. "Maybe." "And why Adrian stays up late talking to you? You noticed that?" "I'm 8, not blind." Adrian bit back a smile. Lucas turned to Adrian. "So does this mean you're going to be my dad?" "I don't know," Adrian said honestly. "That's not really my decision to make alone." "But you want to be?" Adrian looked at Victoria, then back at Lucas. "Yeah, buddy, I do." Lucas nodded slowly. "Okay. Can you come to the father-son thing on Sunday?" "Absolutely." "Cool." Lucas stood up. "Can I go now? Emma's probably destroying the garden looking for rabbit holes." Victoria laughed again. "Yeah, go ahead." Lucas left, and suddenly it was just the two of them. "That went better than I expected," Adrian said. "He's a resilient kid." Victoria opened the leather folder she'd been holding. "I need to show you something." Inside were legal documents, lots of them. "I met with my lawyer this morning," Victoria said. "Asked her about adoption procedures, what it would take for you to legally adopt Lucas." Adrian's breath caught. "Victoria, it's complicated because you're not my spouse. But she said if we were married, it would be straightforward. You'd adopt Lucas, I'd adopt Emma, and we'd be a legal family." "Are you—" Adrian's voice came out hoarse. "Are you proposing?" "No, not yet." Victoria set the folder aside. "But I'm saying I've thought about it. I've thought about all of it. What it would mean, what we'd be building. And I'm terrified because this isn't just about us anymore. It's about Emma and Lucas, and what happens if we screw this up." "We might screw it up," Adrian said. "Probably will, at some point." "That doesn't scare you?" "It scares me to death. But the alternative, walking away, pretending this isn't real, that scares me more." Victoria moved to sit beside him. "I've spent my whole life controlling things, building things, making sure everything fits into perfect boxes. But this doesn't fit into a box, Adrian. This is messy and complicated and nothing like what I planned." "I know. But I don't want to give it up." "Then don't." Victoria took his hand. "I'm going to talk to the kids. Really talk to them. Make sure they understand what this means. And if they're okay with it, if everyone's okay with it, then we figure out the next steps, together." "Okay. You're sure about this? About all of it?" Adrian thought about the past 6 months, about the mansion that had become a home, about Lucas's rare smiles and Emma's constant chatter and Victoria's soft laugh when she thought no one was listening. "I've never been more sure of anything," he said. Victoria kissed him, and for the first time, it didn't feel like they were hiding. That night, Victoria sat down with Lucas and Emma separately. Adrian stayed out of it, giving her space to have the conversations that needed to happen. But later, Victoria told him what was said. Lucas had been matter of fact. "So you and Adrian are going to get married?" "Maybe, eventually, if that's something everyone wants." "And then he'd be my stepdad?" "Yes." Lucas had thought about it for exactly 10 seconds. "Okay, that's good." Emma's reaction had been more dramatic. She'd squealed, hugged Victoria so hard they both nearly fell over, and immediately started planning a wedding that involved at least 100 rabbits. "She's going to be disappointed," Victoria said, laughing as she recounted the conversation. "Because I'm not having 100 rabbits at my wedding." "Our wedding," Adrian corrected. Victoria's smile softened. "Our wedding." The father-son event at Lucas's school was awkward in the way all school events are awkward. Adrian showed up in jeans and a button-down, feeling completely out of place among the other fathers in their business casual and easy confidence. But Lucas grabbed his hand the moment he arrived and didn't let go. They built birdhouses together, terrible lopsided things that would probably fall apart in the first strong wind. Lucas was meticulous, measuring everything twice, while Adrian mostly just tried not to hit his thumb with the hammer. "This looks awful," Lucas said, surveying their work. "It's perfect," Adrian countered. "Birds are going to hate it." "Birds don't care about aesthetics. They care about shelter." Lucas grinned. "You sound like a teacher." "I'm going to be a chef, not a teacher." "Chefs teach people how to eat good food. That's kind of the same thing." Adrian ruffled Lucas's hair, and the kid didn't even pull away. Afterward, as they were leaving, another father approached. "Your son did great work today." Adrian opened his mouth to correct him, but Lucas cut in first. "Thanks. My dad's really good at building stuff." The man nodded and walked away. Adrian looked down at Lucas, who was studiously avoiding eye contact. "Buddy." "I know you're not officially my dad yet," Lucas said quietly, "but it feels true, so I just said it." Adrian's chest felt too full. "That okay with you? Me being your dad?" Lucas finally looked up at him. "Yeah, it's really okay." They drove home in comfortable silence, and Adrian thought about how much had changed in 6 months, how far they'd all come from that first awkward dinner. That evening, while helping Emma with a school project about families, she asked the question Adrian had been waiting for. "Is Miss V going to be my mom?" Adrian set down the glue stick. "Would you want that?" Emma chewed on her lip. "I already have a mom. She just isn't here anymore." "I know, baby. But Miss V is here. And she reads me stories and helps me look for rabbits, and she makes really bad pancakes, but she tries really hard." Adrian smiled. "She does try hard. So can I have 2 moms? One who was my mom before, and one who's my mom now?" "Yeah, baby. You can have 2 moms." Emma nodded, satisfied. "Okay, then yes. I want Miss V to be my now mom." Adrian pulled her close and held on tight. November brought the first snow and a surprise visit from Victoria's mother. Catherine Sterling was in her early 60s, impeccably dressed, and carried herself with the same controlled elegance as her daughter. She arrived unannounced on a Tuesday afternoon, sweeping through the front door like she owned the place, which, Adrian supposed, she technically had at one point. "Victoria, darling," Catherine said, air-kissing her daughter's cheeks. "You look tired. Are you sleeping enough?" "Hello, Mother. This is unexpected. I was in Denver for a charity luncheon and thought I'd stop by." Catherine's sharp eyes landed on Adrian. "And who is this?" "Adrian Cole. He manages the household." Catherine's eyebrow raised a fraction. "How domestic." Adrian bit back a dozen responses and settled for, "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Sterling." "It's Miss Sterling. I've been divorced for 15 years. She turned back to Victoria. "Where's my grandson?" "School. He'll be home at 3. "Good. I'll wait." Dinner that night was excruciating. Catherine held court at the head of the table, asking pointed questions about Lucas's grades and extracurricular activities, while Emma tried very hard to use her best manners and kept accidentally dropping her fork. "Emma, darling, hold your utensil properly," Catherine instructed. "She's 7, Adrian said mildly. "She's doing fine." Catherine's gaze sharpened on him. I wasn't aware the house manager participated in family dinners. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Victoria set down her wine glass. Mother, Adrian is more than the house manager. Oh? He's family. Catherine's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind her eyes. I see. How modern of you. It's not modern. It's honest. And does Marcus know about this arrangement? Marcus has no say in my life anymore. He's Lucas's father. Biologically, but he hasn't acted like a father in 3 years. Victoria's voice was steel now. Adrian has been more of a father to Lucas in 6 months than Marcus ever was. Catherine dabbed her mouth with her napkin. Forgive me for being concerned about my grandson being raised by the help. Adrian's hands clenched under the table, but Victoria beat him to the response. Adrian is not the help, Mother. He's the man I'm in love with. And if you can't be respectful of that, you can leave. The silence that followed was deafening. Lucas and Emma both stared at their plates, and Adrian felt like he'd been punched. Catherine stood slowly. I think I will leave, actually. Clearly you've made your choices, Victoria. I just hope you don't come to regret them. The only thing I regret is not standing up to you sooner. Catherine left without another word, and the door closed behind her with a decisive click. Victoria sat back down, her hands shaking slightly. Well, she said, that could have gone better. Lucas looked up. Grandma's kind of mean. Yeah, buddy, she is. Are you okay, Mom? Victoria smiled, and it was real. Yeah, I really am. That night, after the kids were in bed, Adrian found Victoria on her balcony again. Your mother hates me, he said. My mother hates everyone. Don't take it personally. She called me the help. I know. I'm sorry. Adrian leaned against the railing beside her. Does it bother you? What she thinks? It used to, for most of my life, actually. Victoria looked out at the dark gardens. My mother built her entire identity around appearances. Who we knew, what we owned, how things looked from the outside. And I spent 30 years trying to live up to that, trying to be the daughter she wanted. And now? Now I don't care, because I finally figured out that her approval was never going to make me happy. The only people whose opinions matter are standing in this house right now. Adrian pulled her close. I'm proud of you. For standing up to my mother? For choosing us. Victoria turned in his arms. There was never really a choice, Adrian. It's always been you. Christmas came faster than any of them expected. Emma wanted a tree that touched the ceiling. Lucas wanted something more modest. They compromised on a 12-foot spruce that took 4 people to set up and looked slightly drunk no matter how much they adjusted it. Decorating became a full family affair. Victoria tried to organize it, color-coordinated ornaments, strategic placement, but Emma had other ideas, and within an hour the tree was a chaotic explosion of mismatched decorations and tinsel. It's supposed to be balanced, Victoria said, staring at the lopsided result. It's perfect, Adrian countered. Lucas hung a handmade ornament he'd crafted in art class, a clay snowman with a slightly melted face. Emma added 6 rabbit-themed decorations she'd convinced Adrian to buy at the craft store. Victoria stepped back and surveyed their work. It's terrible, she said. Yep, Adrian agreed. I love it. Me too. Christmas morning was chaos. Emma was up at 5:30, jumping on Lucas's bed until he groaned and threw a pillow at her. They thundered downstairs together, and Adrian and Victoria followed at a more reasonable pace, both clutching coffee like lifelines. The living room looked like a wrapping paper tornado had hit it within minutes. Emma tore through her presents with abandon while Lucas opened his carefully, saving the paper. Victoria gave Adrian a watch, simple, elegant, probably expensive. Adrian gave Victoria a framed photo of all 4 of them from Thanksgiving, the one where Emma had chocolate on her face, and Lucas was actually smiling and nobody looked perfect. Victoria cried. That afternoon, while the kids played in the snow outside, Adrian found Victoria in the kitchen attempting to make hot chocolate from scratch. You know we have a chef for this, right? He teased. Thomas has the day off, and I wanted to try. How's it going? Victoria looked down at the pot of chocolate that had somehow seized into a grainy mess. Terribly. Adrian laughed and took over, fixing the chocolate while Victoria watched with an expression somewhere between admiration and annoyance. How do you make it look so easy? She asked. Practice, Lots and lots of practice. I'm not good at this. The domestic stuff. You're learning. That's what matters. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I called my lawyer yesterday. Adrian's hand stilled on the whisk. About? About us. About making this official. She pulled out a small velvet box from her pocket. I know I said I wasn't proposing yet, but I changed my mind. Adrian's heart stopped. Victoria opened the box. Inside was a simple platinum band. I'm not doing this the traditional way because nothing about us has been traditional, she said. But I love you, Adrian Cole. I love the way you make Lucas laugh and how you never give up on Emma's rabbit obsession. I love that you call me out when I'm being too controlling and that you make terrible jokes and that you're willing to build a life with me even though it's messy and complicated. Adrian couldn't speak. So I'm asking, Victoria continued, will you marry me? Yes, Adrian managed. Absolutely yes. She slid the ring onto his finger and it fit perfectly. They kissed in the kitchen while the hot chocolate threatened to boil over, and neither of them cared. The kids found them a few minutes later. Are you guys kissing again? Emma asked. Gross. We're engaged, Victoria said. Adrian and I are getting married. Emma shrieked with joy. Lucas just smiled and said, finally. The wedding happened on a Saturday in late March. Not a big production with hundreds of guests and photographers, just a small ceremony in the garden with the people who mattered. Thomas officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. Maria cried through the entire thing. Elena handled logistics with military precision. Lucas stood beside Adrian, looking grown up in his suit. Emma was the flower girl and took her job very seriously, scattering petals with the intensity of someone defusing a bomb. Victoria wore a simple ivory dress and flowers in her hair, and when she walked down the makeshift aisle, Adrian forgot how to breathe. The vows were short. Adrian promised to love her even when she was being impossible. Victoria promised to try not to be impossible too often. They both promised to show up, to stay, to build something real together. When Thomas pronounced them married, Lucas and Emma cheered and Adrian kissed his wife for the first time. The reception was in the mansion, with music and food, and the kind of laughter that echoed through rooms that had once felt so empty. Adrian danced with Emma, who stood on his feet and giggled the whole time. Victoria danced with Lucas, who tolerated it with good grace. Later, when the kids were occupied with cake, Victoria pulled Adrian onto the makeshift dance floor. Happy? She asked. Incredibly. Even though my mother didn't come? Especially because your mother didn't come, Victoria laughed. Fair point. They swayed together and Adrian looked around at the life they'd built. At Lucas helping Emma chase Marshmallow through the garden. At Maria and Thomas arguing good-naturedly about the cake recipe. At the house that had transformed from a cold mansion into a home filled with noise and mess and love. I never thought I'd have this, Adrian said quietly. What? A house in the suburbs and 2 kids? A family? A real one? Victoria rested her head on his chest. Me neither. 6 months later, the adoption papers were finalized. Emma became Emma Cole Sterling. Lucas became Lucas Cole Sterling. And on a random Tuesday afternoon, they all went to the courthouse and made it official. The judge asked Lucas if he understood what adoption meant. It means Adrian is my dad for real, Lucas said. Not just because he acts like it, but because it's legal. The judge smiled. That's exactly right. She asked Emma the same question. It means Mom, Emma corrected herself, is my mom now, and we're all a family. And is that what you want? Yes. Emma nodded so hard her entire body moved. More than anything. The judge signed the papers, and just like that, they were official. Walking out of the courthouse, Adrian carried the paperwork that proved what he'd already known for months. They were a family, messy, complicated, imperfect, but real. That night, they made pizza again. It had become their tradition, their way of celebrating everything that mattered. Lucas had gotten better at stretching the dough, though he still preferred measuring ingredients with scientific precision. Emma still got flour everywhere and didn't care. Victoria had learned to relax about the mess, even when sauce ended up on the ceiling. Adrian stood back and watched them, these 3 people who'd become his whole world. Dad, you're burning the crust, Lucas called. Dad. Adrian would never get tired of hearing that. On it, he said, pulling the pizza from the oven. They ate together, crammed around the kitchen island instead of the formal dining room, talking over each other and laughing at Emma's story about Marshmallow's latest adventure. Later, after the kids were in bed, Adrian and Victoria cleaned up together. I have something to tell you, Victoria said, drying a plate. Okay. I'm stepping back from Sterling Innovations. Adrian stopped mid-scrub. What? Not completely, but I'm bringing in a COO to handle day-to-day operations. I'll stay on as CEO, but with reduced hours. She set down the towel. I don't want to miss this, Adrian. The kids growing up, your culinary career, Friday night pizza. I spent so long building a company that I forgot to build a life. Are you sure? Completely. The company will be fine. Better than fine. But I only get one chance to be Lucas and Emma's mom. Only one chance to be your wife. She smiled. I'm choosing us. Adrian pulled her close and kissed her. I love you. I love you too. A year after the wedding, Adrian graduated from culinary school at the top of his class. Victoria threw him a party, and the house filled with friends and former classmates and instructors who all wanted to know what his plans were. The answer came 3 months later when they opened Second Chances. It was a small restaurant, cozy and warm, nothing like the high-end establishments Philippe had worked in. They served comfort food elevated just enough to feel special. Homemade pasta, roasted chicken, fresh bread. And on Sundays, they offered a special family-style dinner that included homemade pizza. Victoria handled the business side. Adrian ran the kitchen. And every Friday night, without fail, they closed early and brought Lucas and Emma in to make pizza together. The restaurant became a fixture in the neighborhood. People came for the food, but stayed for the atmosphere, for the feeling that they were eating in someone's home rather than just another restaurant. Critics called it charmingly unpretentious. Customers called it their favorite place in Denver. Adrian just called it home. 5 years after that first spilled cleaning card in the marble hallway, Adrian stood in the restaurant kitchen finishing up the night's service. Lucas was 15 now, tall and confident in a way that still surprised Adrian sometimes. He'd started helping at the restaurant on weekends, proving to have a natural talent for front-of-house work. Emma was 12, still obsessed with rabbits, but now also interested in photography. She'd been documenting the restaurant since it opened, building a portfolio that was actually impressive. Victoria walked into the kitchen, having just finished balancing the books in the office. "Good night?" she asked. "Great night. We're completely booked for next weekend." "I know, I'm going to need to hire more servers." Adrian pulled her close, not caring that he smelled like garlic and olive oil. "Remember when you offered me a job managing your household? I remember you spilling cleaning supplies everywhere and bleeding on my floor." "I did not bleed on your floor. It was barely a scratch." "You were bleeding." "The point," Adrian said, kissing her, "is that I'm glad I said yes, even though I was terrifying, especially because you were terrifying." Victoria laughed. "We should get home. Emma has a project due tomorrow that she definitely hasn't finished. And Lucas probably hasn't done his calculus homework." Naturally. They locked up the restaurant and drove home together. This life they'd built somehow both exactly what Adrian had dreamed of and nothing like he'd ever imagined. The mansion was lit up when they arrived, and through the windows Adrian could see Emma sprawled on the living room floor with art supplies everywhere, while Lucas sat at the dining table with his laptop and a calculator. "They're disasters," Victoria said fondly. "Our disasters." "Yeah, ours." They walked inside together, and the house erupted in noise. Emma needed help with perspective in her drawing. Lucas was stuck on a problem and getting frustrated. There were dishes in the sink and school books scattered across every surface, and someone had left wet towels on the bathroom floor. It was messy and chaotic and absolutely perfect. That night, after helping Emma finish her project and talking Lucas through his homework, and nagging both of them about the towels, Adrian found Victoria already in bed reading. "Long day," she said, setting down her book. "Good day." "The best kind of long." Adrian climbed into bed beside her. "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" "Where, specifically?" "All of it. The restaurant, the kids, this life." Victoria thought about it. "No. When I hired you, I thought I was getting a competent employee. Maybe someone who could help me figure out how to connect with Lucas. And instead I got a family, A real one. She turned to face him. You know what the scary part is? What? I almost didn't offer you the job. I saw you in that hallway, bleeding and apologizing, and my first instinct was to just walk away, let someone else handle it. Why didn't you? Because something about you made me stop, made me pay attention. Victoria touched his face. Best decision I ever made. Second best, Adrian corrected. The pizza nights were the best decision. Victoria laughed and kissed him, and somewhere down the hall, one of the kids yelled for them to keep it down, and the house settled into the comfortable noise of a family that had found each other against all odds. Years later, when people asked Adrian about his life, about how a single father working double shifts ended up married to one of the most successful businesswomen in Denver, he never knew quite what to say. The truth was too complicated for casual conversation. It involved spilled cleaning supplies and grief, and taking chances on people who seemed impossible. It involved learning that family wasn't about biology or perfection, but about showing up even when things got hard. It involved understanding that sometimes the best things in life came from the moments when everything fell apart. So instead, Adrian would smile and say, "We got lucky." And Victoria, standing beside him, would squeeze his hand and add, "Incredibly lucky." Because that's what love was, in the end. Not the absence of struggle or the guarantee of easy. It was choosing to build something real with another imperfect person and hoping like hell it would be enough. And for them, it was. It really was.